What led to the death of the first post-war British subculture of dandies, riots, and rock and roll? In this video, we're going to examine how the very first youth subculture arose as a reaction to post-war Britain, and why it became despised and died off. The subculture that even the Beatles emulated in the early formation of the band.
And John was always keen to get out of his house because of his Aunt Mimi was kind of very stern and strict, and she embarrassed him. I remember going to John's house once when I first had met him. I was still at the Institute, and we were trying to look like teddy boys, which was like that style in those days. And I must have looked pretty good because she was like, she didn't like me at all. She was really shocked. She said, "Look at him, you know, who is this? Bringing this boy around to this house. You look at him, he looks dreadful, like a teddy boy." And he'd just say, "Shut up, Murray, shut up."
This is the story of a boy named Ted. If his mother said, "Ted, be good."
During World War II, the civilian death toll rose to 70,000 in Britain, largely due to German bombing raids during the Blitz. 40,000 civilians died in the 7-month period between September 1940 and May 1941, almost half of them in London. During the Blitz, children were evacuated to the countryside, while the people endured tight rationing due to severe food shortages. The trauma of the war did not break the British spirit, but rather strengthened it. However, the devastation and challenges faced by the country continued to affect people well after the war ended. Post-war Britain was harsh, but in different and unexpected ways from the war. As food rationing continued into the 1950s, the rebuilding of infrastructure dragged on, with housing shortages and economic instability. So how did the British youth coming of age escape the devastation of their war-torn and traumatized country? Music and fashion brought them together, with the birth of the first subculture, known as the Teddy Boys.
Everybody, let's get together tonight. I've been doing my homework all the week long.
In the midst of all this devastation, there were still young people trying to find their place in the world. Still teenage hormones raging on. Still young people looking for a purpose. Their future was uncertain as their parents tried to create a normal post-war life, leaving the memories of the war behind. And in the midst of the rebuilding, American rock and roll had come onto the scene. Combining the dreariness of post-war Britain, along with this never-before-heard music on the radio, with young people hungry for some excitement, this new subculture spread quickly. Young people were longing for something to happen, longing for an escape from their dull existence as they walked past bomb-damaged buildings that were still awaiting repair or demolition. Around 1953, newspapers began reporting on a trend in young men's attire they referred to as the New Edwardian look. The look was created by Savile Row and tried to recapture the optimism of the Edwardian era. The look was inspired by Edwardian dandies, who placed importance on their appearance and leisurely hobbies. King Edward was known as the leader of the fashionable elite. The Edwardian period is sometimes portrayed as a romantic golden age of long summer afternoons and garden parties, basking in a sun that never set on the British Empire. The New Edwardian was the look of the middle class reacting to the government-imposed austerity. However, the working-class teenagers took the look and made it their own. These teens began to identify with each other based on their style, their choice of music, and eventually, dance. This new emerging youth culture became popular right before rock and roll became popular. The two would eventually intersect and sweep across Britain as the very first youth culture known as Teddy Boys. The name Teddy Boy was coined around September 1953, when a Daily Express newspaper headline shortened Edward to Teddy and coined the term Teddy Boy, and is often shortened to Teds. Teddy Boys altered the Edwardian suits with American Western accessories. Maverick Slim Jim neckties and silk pattern waistcoats became part of this new trend that British young men embraced. In addition to the jacket, most Teddy Boys wore something called drainpipe trousers, a type of trouser leg that was straight down, not skin tight, but also not overly baggy, worn high-waisted to show off their socks. They had seen photos of American young men wearing what were known as zoot suits, and in those days everything American was cool, so they tried to emulate it. In regards to footwear, the Teddy Boys had three favourites to choose from: highly polished Oxfords, chunky brogues, and crepe-soled shoes, often suede, also known as brothel creepers. Once the working class embraced the Edwardian style, the middle class rejected it. This newspaper article cites the reaction. The Teddy Boy is a uniquely British phenomenon and predates the introduction of American rock and roll music into Britain in late 1955 by Bill Haley and his Comets. However, one fact is clear, that when rock and roll did hit Britain like a thunderbolt in 1955, the music would quickly become adopted by Britain's Teddy Boys, and from that point onwards, the style and the music became inseparable.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around.
Although Teddy Boys became associated with rock and roll music, prior to the advent of that genre, Teddy Boys also listened and danced to R&B, jazz and skiffle music.
When our local people are saying you're keeping them awake at all hours of the morning, slamming car doors, singing, playing guitars, now, is there any truth in that?
No, not at all.
Well, what happens?
Well, we're usually too tired to make a noise at all of any sort.
How long do you play at a time?
Well, 3 to 4 hours sometimes.
Pretty exhausting?
Yes.
Absolutely whacked?
Absolutely.
Well, now, I've heard someone say your music is pagan. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think it is at all. I think it's jolly
What do you get out
exciting.
of it? What do you get out of it?
Well, we enjoy it. We enjoy it very much.
Express yourself?
Yes.
And you're going to carry on playing skiffle for years
Yes.
and years and years?
As long as people still enjoy it.
They had three main dances, including the jive, the bop and the creep. The well-known dance, the creep, a slow shuffle, became identified with Teddy Boys. British rock and roll artists such as Tommy Steele, Marty Wilde, Cliff Richard, Dickie Pride and Joe Brown became popular with the Teddy Boy culture, as did the early Merseybeat scene. The Beatles emulated the Teddy Boy style in the early formation of the band. Paul McCartney will go on to write a song called Teddy Boy, which was originally intended to be a Beatles song, but was eventually dismissed until his first solo album. Here is a sample of the song in a 1969 version for the Beatles, and then McCartney's solo album version.
Mommy, don't worry now, Teddy Boy's here, taking good care of you. This is the story of a boy named Ted. If his mother said Ted be good, he would.
Which do you prefer? The Tony Curtis American hairstyle became a popular hairstyle for Teddy Boys. As they walked through the streets, past areas that were still undergoing reconstruction and redevelopment, they bonded over fashion and rock and roll music. Oftentimes they gathered together at pubs, coffee bars and dance halls inside churches, sometimes meeting up at bombed locations still waiting to be rebuilt.
Whatever may be said about this place, it obviously fulfills a desperate need. The bleak, bare rooms were crowded with almost 400 teenagers, pathetically anxious to have a good time.
Why do you think this place is better than the others?
Well, they've not got anything against Edwardian suits, you know. You wear what you like here.
Well, you go down the YMCA and everybody gives you dirty looks. Is it the clothes you wear, you see?
But you're very well dressed. Why do you think that you do get these black looks?
Well, I think it's a lot of people, you know, jealous, the grown-ups. I think that's mainly one of the reasons.
So it's because you're more smartly dressed than they are?
Well, we would think so, but how they taught, that's better than us.
I'd rather go with a teddy boy than an ordinary boy?
Teddy boy any day.
Teddy boy any day?
Yes.
What are you going to do when the weather gets better in the summer?
Well, I should still come to the coffee bar every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday.
Every night?
Yes, been every night since it's been open.
Well, why do you come here?
Well, I think it's the only place in town where you don't have to pay to go in. If you go in a cafe, you have to pay to drink or something like that. You go to a dance, you'll have to pay, but here you don't have to pay to come in. I think that if I had to pay, not many people would come.
Well, when the weather's better and it's hot, you don't have to pay to go out in the country, do you?
Ah, but you see, if you go in the country, people get to mischief and things like that, and nothing much to do in the country. Yet if you come here, you can dance and talk to your friends and everything.
Hold me, hold me, hold me, hold me.
Teddy Boys did not know what the future held for them, but at least they had the escape, in their newfound acceptance into the teddy boy subculture. Girls eventually joined in on the fun, and soon teddy girls gained popularity through fashion and love of music. Teddy girls, also called Judies, wore draped jackets, pencil skirts, rolled-up jeans, flat shoes, tailored jackets with velvet collars, and straw boater hats. Although some girls were on the fence about this new trend, as one writes to the Daily Mail about her dilemma. I'm 17, and what is generally termed a nice girl. I don't smoke, drink, or swear. I like dancing, but my main interests are outdoor activities. Like other girls of my age, I want a boyfriend, but it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Yet teddy girls who dress and behave cheaply have boyfriends galore. Is it worth being a sweet, old-fashioned girl anymore? The Daily Mirror offered a startlingly unsympathetic response. Apparently, miss, you've got to rock and roll with the times. Teddy boys were looked down upon as hoodlums by many parents, authorities, and the middle class. Eventually, the violence made its way into this new subculture. There were several notable riots associated with the teddy boys in the 1950s. When a teenager, John Beckley, was murdered by a teddy boy gang known as the Ploughboys in July 1953 after a fight that started on Clapham Common, the Daily Mirror's headline, "Flick knives, dance music, and Edwardian suits," linked criminality to clothes worn by teddy boys. Then, the 1958 Notting Hill riots included working-class youth who clashed with immigrants living in the area. The British Nationality Act of 1948 had given citizenship of the UK and its colonies to all people living in the British Empire, bringing many new people to England. The disturbances, rioting and fights continued every night from August 29th until September 6th. The Metropolitan Police arrested more than 140 people during the period of unrest. Some lazy reporters used the term teddy boy to describe any young working-class person involved in the riot. While some could genuinely be labelled as such, it was not a teddy boy-led fight. The press had a field day with this, and anyone labelled a teddy boy was considered someone causing serious trouble. The pressure to avoid anyone who was associated with this subculture mounted. This bad press, combined with the trend naturally giving way to new styles, began to see the subculture slowly die off. Although not everyone lumped the teddy boys together with the riots. One Baptist minister from Leamington went a little further, however, offering an open invitation to 100 teddy boys and their girlfriends to a church social, a teddy boys picnic. Although behaviour was a little unusual for a church event, cigarettes were being passed round during the hymns, girls sat on their teddy boy boyfriends' laps, and pop songs were sung on the porch beforehand. The event, according to the Birmingham Daily Post, was a great success. One church worker described the guests as the nicest young folk you could hope to meet. Some of the Teds were no angels, that is true, and occasional gang fighting could get rough at times, but they were certainly not as bad as the media painted them.
Well, my opinion of the teddy boys, they're all right. They're not so bad as they're painted. Don't believe in all the press talk you read about. It's a build-up for the papers. The teddy boy, today, in my opinion, is he gets good money and he dresses himself accordingly. I have no trouble with them in here. They come in here for a drink. I've told them they're not allowed to drink intoxicating liquors for the simple reason I can't discern who's 20 and who's 16.
One notable original Ted, Breathless Dan Coffey from South Wales, was largely responsible for not only keeping the movement going into the 60s, but for introducing rockabilly music into Britain from the southern states of America. In the late 60s, there was a second generation of teddy boys who discovered rockabilly. In the 1970s, as a reaction to punk, another generation of Teds appeared. They were frequently referred to by the older generation as plastics. Rockabilly became the mainstream music of the teddy boys into the 70s. When the Teds began to experience a rebirth in the early 1970s, Vivienne Westwood started selling draped jackets and creepers in her shop Let It Rock on King's Road. And Ringo Starr played a teddy boy in 1973 for the film That'll Be the Day. A former Ted had this to say about the teddy boy subculture. Yeah, I like causing trouble. It's the teddy boy in me. I used to be a teddy boy. Feeling slightly inferior and wanted to cause a bit of bother and get some action going on in the room rather than get bored stiff.
Doesn't seem to belong to the world that I live in. He seems to be living in a dream. I've noticed this about the boy ever since we returned to London, just after the war. During the war, he was like other children, he was evacuated. But he was perhaps more fortunate than others, than he was evacuated to a place where he had woods and fields and he could run about free all day. And then he returned to London. And I noticed the look of puzzlement on the boy's face when he saw the streets, pavements, houses. He looked like a trapped animal. I think that's the impression that I get about that boy, that he is a trapped animal, trying to find some way out. He just doesn't know.
While the teddy boy subculture began to die out in the late 1950s, another subculture would begin to rise up. We will get into that in the next video. If you enjoy learning about music and culture from the past, be sure to like and subscribe so that we know what our viewers find interesting and can make more.